Happy New Year. So today, all I'm gonna do is walk you through the books I read in 2024 that I think you should read in 2025 if you haven't. There's really only like 2 books on this list that I think I can put on your radar that you may or may not have heard of, or maybe heard of but didn't want to read, and the rest of the books are books that you have already made a decision about before you have even started. I will point out the books that I think you should read that you probably maybe haven't heard of or haven't made a decision about, and those are different than my best books of the year, my 5-star book of the year, because of the way that I rate books and because of my tastes and the kinds of reading that I do. I'm not going to sit here and recommend Star Wars books to you. And these are the books that I would recommend to friends if they were like, what's a book you read this year that you really liked and that you think I should read? These are those books. And obviously, everybody has different tastes. Not books for everybody, and I'm a kind of a weirdo, and I'm not going to sit here and recommend Hamlet to you, although honestly, if you for some reason haven't read Hamlet, you should get on that, frankly. Okay? I'm trying to do fiction, but it is what it is. You know what I mean? Okay. So, book number 1 is Julia by Sandra Newman, which is a retelling of 1984, George Orwell's 1984, commissioned and authorized by the Orwell Foundation estate. This one is told from Julia's point of view. I read 1984 for the first time last December. I think it was the last book I read in 2023. And the characters in it are characters as we would write them in the 21st century. Rather, they are prompts to make political points, and this doesn't bother me, especially female characters. I was really thinking about it for reasons that will become clear throughout 2025 last night, that lots of times science fiction doesn't have characters, they have props, they have archetypes, and this doesn't bother me, but I think it does upset a lot of people. And the characters that fall most into this problem are female characters for reasons that I think are obvious. But I'm not really typically bothered by that, although I have found myself being more annoyed by it this year than I ever have in the past, which is surprising to me. Not in science fiction, in other genres. In what am I trying to say? So Julia is, from Julia's point of view, Julia is the woman that Winston falls in love with in 1984, and just what she was doing theoretically, what her perspective on the world that she lived in was. I found it really impactful, really biting, really... Julia is more clear-eyed about the world than Winston is, than anything that's going on. She just seems to face it with more the world with a clearer mind than Winston does, but how much she knows or understands about it is still pretty up for interpretation. So I really liked it. I definitely recommend this one. I don't know how many people on the internets are aware of this book, but I think it's definitely worth the read. 3 books I read are the C.S. Lewis's Space trilogy, Out of the Silent Planet, which is the first one, which I think is pretty good science fiction on its own. Ransom is kidnapped and he is taken to Mars. Ransom is walking home from work one night and he is approached by this woman, and she's like, oh my God, where is my son? He hasn't come home from work. Can you go up the street and see if you can find out what's keeping my son? I think she calls him Simple. I really don't, this is not important. So he goes to the house and he's met by 2 people he used to work with, he doesn't really like, but they're going to kidnap this person that Ransom's been sent to look for, to take him to Mars to see if their thing works, their rocket ship, I guess. So instead they take Ransom, and Ransom gets stranded on Mars, and He goes there, written in the interwar period, and so obviously pre-space race, which I found really interesting when I read it for the first time when I was 12 years old. But also, like, it is Christian apologetics, and books 2 and 3, Paralandra, which takes place on Venus, and 3, That Hideous Strength, which takes place on planet Earth, are straight up apologetics. And so if you're looking for science fiction, I don't necessarily recommend these, but if you're looking for really interesting and kind of bizarre apologetics, metaphysics, I would recommend them. I also think like C.S. Lewis kind of wrote these books first and then had these ideas more crystallized in the Chronicles of Narnia, which is kind of a really bizarre thing to say because the Chronicles of Narnia is for kids, but they're much clearer, they're much more concise, they're less outright insane. So I would say, like, I loved That Hideous Strength. If you want to know what the fuck he's talking about, though, you might be better off just reading The Last Battle. I'd like to recommend The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis. This is like a Divine Comedy, Dante thing. It's teeny tiny. It's like 100 pages. And it just follows like one guy, and he wakes up at a bus station, and he goes from like purgatory, I don't know about C.S. Lewis's belief in purgatory to hell to heaven, and just like seeing it. This is straight up apologetics, don't get me wrong, but C.S. Lewis always has the ability to write just like so concisely and like clearly, and like I love the way he writes, and I just think he makes his point always perfect. Read Pachinko by Jin Lee in March-ish, and this is about a family, a Korean family who moves to Japan during the Japanese occupation of Korea, and it just kind of follows them through the pre-war to the post-war period, I think up into like the 80s or maybe even the early aughts. It's really sad, it's really plotting, but I just really enjoyed this book, and I do in fact recommend it. I think it was like a Goodreads, and like won a bunch of awards the year it came out, which I think was 2017. So yeah. Read Cassandra in Reverse by Holly Small. A book about a woman named Cassandra, and she has autism. That is pretty much clear from the very first page, but she has never been diagnosed with autism, so she just like wanders around the world like completely confused why she can't have relationships with people. And her boyfriend breaks up with her, and she ends up in this situation where she keeps reversing time back to that moment and then further, so that she can like fix her relationship with this boyfriend. I was not expecting to like this book. The contemporary fiction that I've just never really gone for, I've always found kind of shallow. That's not to say like every contemporary or even women's lit book is shallow. I just always have like that prejudice. I was not expecting to like this because it's got the cartoon cover, and it's like clearly for representation reasons and not like, but I just found this like genuinely really charming and moving and a little frustrating, but I did actually really like this, and because it's not something I would necessarily pick up, I do recommend it, so probably other people really like it even more. I read a non-fiction book about Israel and Palestine, 1936, The Great Revolt and the Roots of the Middle East Conflict by Oren Kessler. Oren Kessler is Israeli. This traces the roots of the current conflict in the Middle East to the original settlements, and I can't think of what it was, and the riots in 1936. And I just think like, even though Oren Kessler is Israeli, it's a really balanced and really informative and thorough book about the roots of the conflict, the current conflict, and just kind of the intractability of what's going on in the Middle East. And I read Dune. Obviously I read Dune this year. Who didn't read Dune this year? I saw Dune Part 2 twice in theaters because that movie is perfection. And Genuinely, highlight of my year, Dune Part 2. However, I read Dune. I did read it in 2020, but I just wanted to take a moment to let everybody know that I misremembered the end of Dune Part 1. I did. I was like, when I watched, no, I misremembered the end of Dune. So when I saw Dune Part 2, I was like, this did not happen in the book. But then it did happen in the book, and I was really confused because I read it really quickly at like the end of 2020. So I listened to it this time, and this book is it was made for me. Okay, I'm a weirdo. I'm weird. Have you ever seen me without this hat? People doing drugs in the desert, like just the craziest politics you've ever seen. Space, Jesus, and cults. Chef's kiss. Perfection. You know about Dune. You've already made a decision about whether or not Dune is up your alley, but Dune is up my alley. You know what else is up my alley? The Murderbot Diaries. I've read 5 out of the 7 Murderbot books this year. I've listened to all of them, and I love them. Murderbot is a malfunctioning security unit who hacked its governor module and now has agency, autonomy over its its actions, its thoughts, what it does and what it doesn't want to do. And you know what it wants to do? It wants to watch TV and doesn't want to be in conflict with people. He is the greatest mood of all time. Ladies love Murderbot. And I was just like at a glass cutting class in November, and we were like talking, and they were like, oh, what do you guys do? Because it was a really small class. It was just like 4 people. And I was like, oh, I listen to audiobooks mostly, which is true. And they were like, oh, listen to anything good? And I said, girl, have I got something for you. Murderbot. They're short. They're mostly novellas. Like the later books I think are more like novel length, but the earlier books are novellas. They're funny. They're heartwarming. They're exciting. Murderbot. He did murder a bunch of people that one time, but never again. He wasn't in control of himself. He's the best. Ladies love Murderbot, and if you're a lady, or even if you're not a lady, you probably would also love Murderbot, because my friend who doesn't like science fiction that much, she read Murderbot. She read the first book, All Systems Red by Martha Wells, and she said, oh my god, he's such a mood. He is such a mood. Also, he calls himself it, but he is narrated by a male voice actor on the audiobook, so unfortunately Murderbot is a man now. And also, it's not lost on me that like a security unit with some human parts those parts will be male, even if he doesn't have other human parts, because that would be crazy. Why would you give your Murderbot a penis? You wouldn't. That's the truth of the matter. Speaking of artificial intelligence, I read the first 2 Imperial Radch books, Ancillary Justice and Ancillary Sword, I think, which is also about a messed up little AI. Isn't that crazy? This AI is a ship, and it can control all of the parts of the ship, and it has like human parts of the ship. It's called ancillaries, and they're like cloned humans, dead human bodies that they stick the ship AI in them. Anyway, throughout the first book, you find out like what caused this one AI to kind of split off from the rest of them, and why she is like desperate to like take revenge on the leader of the Imperium. So I really like these books. They're really interesting. They're really engaging. Same kind of deal. I love a robot trying to make friends. So you've already also made a decision about The Secret History by Donna Tart, but I finished The Secret History this year. So I started a book club at my work, and the first book we read was The Secret History by Donna Tart, which, you know, it's about the most pretentious college students justifying murder. That's what it's about. And they do justify murder, and they do commit murder. And you've already made a decision about whether or not to read The Secret History. I loved The Secret History because what about me says that I do not want to read about the world's worst 21-year-olds murdering somebody or many people, up to you, and then like justifying it to themselves and then losing their freaking minds about it. On the one hand, I'm like really glad I read this year because I started it when I was 24, like not even 2 years out of college, in like not the same circumstances, but I was in an annoying honors program in college, and I think that really was like how much I missed it because we were like deep in lockdown, and how much I missed being in my annoying honors program in college, deep in lockdown when I like wasn't seeing anybody and I was living on my own for the first time. Like that really would have colored how I responded to this book. So now I'm social and I'm more grown up and I'm more far removed from the entire situation of being in SJLA. Like I still got it on a fundamental level, but I was not as sympathetic to these characters as I would have been. And that is a blessing. It is. The next book we read for my book club was The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, which is about like a summer camp and this girl goes missing at the summer camp. It's a mystery thriller-esque book. I don't usually have the greatest of luck with mystery thrillers, and I don't like the ending of this book, although I do like understand it. I just don't like it very much. And I would say like if you like mystery thrillers or like you're not a huge mystery thriller reader, I don't know, this book has won like all the awards this year. If you're not like a huge mystery thriller reader but you always like them, this is a really engaging book. I read it in one sitting basically because I didn't finish it in time. Oh my god, I did read Iron Flame this year. I read Fourth Wing last year and I did read Iron Flame this year, and I feel embarrassed to like these books because they are fundamentally silly, they're fundamentally badly written, they just suck you right in. No shade if you think that these are the peak of literature, they're not, but they are good. And I liked Iron Flame and I did give it 4 stars, and I like the fantasy elements of it. I don't necessarily think that they're well thought out or like well executed, and I like that it's kind of light on the romance, but when the romance gets going it's like, all right, let's go, you know what I mean? Which is what I like about it. I think like people who are fantasy readers and people who are romance readers don't like it because it is neither, but because it is like explicitly marketed as romantasy and it is heavy on the fantasy, it works for me. The most recent book, so maybe it's suffering from recency bias, but also my favorite book of the year, is Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson, which is about these 2 weirdo teens over the course of like 3 weeks in the summer. They like hang out, they make out a little bit, and they make a poster that says, I don't even remember what the fuck it says. The Edge is a shanty town filled with gold seekers. We are fugitives and the law is skinny with hunger for us. Oh my god, it doesn't mean anything. But have you ever been 16 years old? I've been 16 years old several years ago at this point. Sad. And you're just like, everything in the world is bad and everybody hates me. And I'm the smartest person alive. So true. Anyway, they like make these posters, they make a bunch of copies of it, they put them up all over town, and it just like sort of snowballs out of their control from there, and like people get like so caught up in like it is like basically impossible for me to express like how tenderhearted, how earnest, how non-cynical this book is, and like sad stuff is happening, and you know, complicated human feelings are involved, and like how people respond is like very realistic, but it's not cynical, it's not mean-spirited. I just love a book that is just what it is. It's not long, it's like 250 pages, and I just think it's good. I think like if you're looking for like a short, easy, heartfelt read, Now Is Not the Time to Panic, let me hold it up for you again, it's the book for you. It's the book for me, and it was my favorite book of the year. Let me know what your favorite book of the year was, and I will see you, I don't know, probably sometime in the future. So, and Happy New Year. I mean, it's New Year's Eve for me, but it is It's like the middle. It's not the middle. It's still the beginning of the year. What am I talking about? Anyway, Happy New Year. Bye.